So I haven't posted any glazing videos yet because I want to be able to post from glazing all the way through to the firing. And because I'm still trying to figure that out in my home studio, I'm waiting to post those videos until I'm satisfied with the results. In the meantime, some of the things that I did get out of the kiln, I look at as a perfect opportunity for me to share other techniques with you. Maybe techniques you wouldn't normally use. Some of these I don't normally use in my work, but because I'm not pleased with the results of this glaze firing, I'm going to add something else to it. So I know a lot of you are wondering, well, what can she add to a surface that is already glazed? Well, we add what we call ceramic decals or glass decals. They can be added to glass objects as well at lower temperatures. So ceramic decals, if you remember your grandma's china, unless you had a bougie grandma that had real hand-painted china. If she didn't, she probably had flowered china, and those flowers that were on her china were done with decals. So that would be considered the traditional way of decaling a plate, and that's just adding a pattern to the surface. And at Victorian times, it was usually a floral design. So nowadays we can use decals, which is firing on top of the glaze at a lower temperature in all different ways. And they come in commercial ways, so I can buy already existing roses or pink, flowers of any kind, daffodils, whatever it is I'm looking for, I can find that online in any decal place. Also, we have like more modern decals that are for sale from places like this place. And as you can see here, this is a gold bicycle. And I will use this sample. I was given this sample a couple of years ago at a ceramic convention. I haven't used it, so we'll use it today for this demo. I also have some other commercial. Now these are commercial decals that I bought. So here's a sheet of kitty cats. Of course I would have a sheet of kitty cats. So I actually used these same silhouettes of these kitty cats. I scanned this into my computer and then also made stencils of this so I could create layers and layers of kitties on a surface of some of my ceramics. So it would look like there's kitties coming from inside the ceramic out to the surface. So these have been helpful in that way. So, and I bought these the way they are. So more ceramic commercial decals would be like these eyes. Of course, they sell these for those people that make porcelain dolls and things like that, but I think they're interesting just to add a random eye onto something. So these are commercial. I also have some commercial, and they make butterflies and they make snowflakes. And as you can see here, these are gold. And so when these are fired on the surface, they'll be gold. And here's an example of a gold detail on there. It's kind of hard with but if you can see that right in the middle, right here is the gold decal, and it's fired on the surface. See, it won't come off. So sometimes I use these as well. I think it's a good idea if you're going to buy and use commercial decals that you change them up a bit. Don't just use them flat out just as they are, unless you're just using it as an accent or something like that. For instance, here's some little bees too that are commercial. So, but I can also make my own decals, and I can do that by silk screening, which is a whole nother video. And we can silk screen what we call china paints. So that china that your grandmother had, unless of course she was bougie again, it was put on with decals and china paints. And china paints are basically like an oil paint of ceramics, but they're done at a much lower temperature on top of a glazed surface. And during Victorian times, it was really, really popular for all the rich Victorian ladies to get together in the parlor and china paint, because because one of them would have like a little kiln, and they would get together and decorate their own pieces of china. And you know, in the Victorian days, they had pieces for everything. I mean, you know, there was a special spoon for every different kind of marmalade you had. So of course there was all kinds of opportunities to decorate things. And it was kind of like a privileged white lady sewing circle, but they were china painting. So that's the tradition of china painting. Please, anybody that's a historian, you can go ahead and weigh in and, you know, set me straight on the exact time. I'm just giving you a short synopsis of that. So the way that we can make our own ceramic decals is to silk screen them using china paint, which is kind of messy because you do have to use turpentine and stuff to clean it up. So, and it's really quite toxic. So I stay away from that. I'll show you silk screening on clay later on, which is another way that I create depth of surface. In fact, this tile right here, this image is silk screened right directly onto the tile. So I will show you that in another video, but we're gonna add a decal to this today. So the other thing is to buy decal sheets that are all just one color. So these are really nice. And how many do I have? Any that are just, so they come like this. It's just one sheet of one color, and I can use this on my Cricut if you have a Cricut, and use my own designs and have this cut out. So for instance, what I did here on this vase is that I used my Cricut as a stencil, and I hand painted there, and then I actually have a sheet of just plain decal paper, but it's gold. In fact, here's what it looks like. You can see I've cut some other stuff out of it, but you know, so here's the decal sheet, and I put it on my Cricut and cut my design from the decal sheet. Whoops. From the decal sheet out of the Cricut. So the Cricut, in that, if you have a Cricut, I have a Cricut Explorer Air 2, and I really only use it to make stencils, so I'm not an expert on it by any means, but I would expect some videos coming from me next on that. So for instance, getting back to this vase, I used a stencil of this design to create this, then I hand painted it, then I went ahead and glazed it. It came out, and I'm using a new clay body, and I'm not at all happy with the color of the clay that this turned out, and I don't like the way this turned out. So I thought, well, I already have this made up in my Cricut, this design made up in my Cricut, so I'm gonna go ahead and make a decal of it. So I'm going to go ahead and cover, see, I had it cut out on the Cricut. This is the actual decal sheet. It was cut from one of these sheets. And I am going to actually apply it to this. So I have turned this rather kind of flat, icky design, and hopefully, once it's fired on, it'll be much more fabulous gold. Let's see. We'll see. So that's something else we're gonna do. So all this was cut out. I just have it taped on here with a little bit of painter's tape, so I don't lose my pieces after it's cut out from the Cricut. Also, what I do is that I keep this separate from my clay studio. I'm in a separate room, and the reason for that is I want to keep the clay dust away from this process, because any dust that may or may not get between the decal and the ceramic surface, glaze surface that I'm putting it on, will make everything more difficult. So we don't want that to happen. So to minimize as much dust as possible, I try to keep them separate. So yesterday, here's another example of, this is a finished piece. This is on there for good. It's my signature Hugs and Kisses on a gray porcelain that was slip cast. I think I have a slip cast video of me slip casting maybe this form, maybe not, but sooner or later you'll see it if I keep making videos. So the little flower that you see here and my signature hugs and kisses, I also made from one of these clear or colored decal sheets. So here's another decal sheet, which is purple. This one I think turns out to be metallic purple once it's fired. I don't remember, I have to look up the window. So I get these from this place. It's called Herald of Holland. They are not cheap, so practice on something else or a little piece on your Cricut before you cut with it. Although, you know, I like to think that mistakes, sometimes they're expensive, but mistakes are necessary for us to grow as artists, as people, because how do we, you know, learn new things if we know everything already, right? And you never make a mistake. How do you learn new things? So anyway, I don't think of failure as, you know, a terrible thing, especially in ceramics, because you got to get used to it. So last night, I just took a regular old design from my Cricut that was made, that I cut from the Cricut, and I cut this from a solid sheet. And I'm going to apply it to one of these little bowls because I told you at the beginning of the video, I am changing my glazes, my clay bodies, everything. Not really excited by this glaze. It's kind of flat, doesn't give me much interesting. So the color's nice, but it needs something else. So I think maybe a nice little pattern on top of that would be nice. So I'm gonna also do that. You can also buy decals in all kinds of golds and shapes. Like here's some just lines, straight lines that I bought. And you know, I find these useful for putting on the sides of a cup or something like that, just to add interest. So I'm going to go ahead and get set up here, and we're going to do some decaling. Here I'm going to use this ceramic decal that I got free from this Milestone company. So I'm going to take it out of the coverage. I use warm water because it keeps my hands warm. I'm going to make sure there isn't any film on top of the decal. Sometimes there's a little bit of piece of wax paper or something just protecting it. So you want to peel that off like I'm doing here. And then put it in the water and make sure it's completely submerged into the water. You want to use a clean sponge, and wherever you're going to put your decal, you want to wet that surface, and that helps you move the decal around on the surface. Once the decal has soaked for a little bit, you will start to see that it'll release itself from the paper backing, and we're starting to see that here. I can slip it right off that paper backing. These are akin to the temporary tattoos. And notice how I just slipped the backing right off and set this where I wanted it. Now I'm going to smooth out any air bubbles underneath and make sure there isn't anything between the surface, ceramic surface, and the decal. And you want to make sure that you don't have any air bubbles or anything that would come in between the two pieces, because that'll make it so your image will not stick. As you can see here, I'm just using my fingers to make sure that that is, I don't have any air bubbles or anything underneath. What's nice is because the surface is wet, I can move my little bicycle around. I kind of want it to be on that blue line so it looks like it's riding the road or something. It gives the impression that it's doing that. And once I moved it, I have to pat down those air bubbles again, because when I moved it, there was a few air bubbles. It's also helpful afterwards to kind of take it and move it around in the light so you can see if there's any air bubbles underneath. And if there is, you're going to want to smooth those out nice and evenly, like I'm doing here. The very last thing I'm going to do is use my rubber rib, and I have this red one which is real soft, and I'm just going to very softly go over the decal to make sure that I have any air bubbles underneath are folded out of the piece. Perfect! Now let's move on to this vase that I'm not all that excited about. I made these flowers using my Cricut. So, and I do like the resist. I'm just not thrilled with the color of the clay body. So I'm gonna jazz it up a little bit. And I used the same file in my Cricut to make the stencils as I used to cut the decals. And this way I know that they are the same size and they'll fit right over. So let's go ahead and attach those decals. They've been soaking now, and you'll notice it isn't any different than the commercial ones. It slides right off. In fact, I like these quite a bit because they're really quite easy to work with once they're cut. So again, I'm going to wet my surface, and I'm just going to slide that decal right where I need it, and make sure that there isn't any air bubbles or anything. Kind of pat the surface. Remember, I'm using a clean sponge. I'm going to go ahead and add a couple more of these. And I think what this is doing is it's just adding a little pop to my surface, that little pop of gold. Kind of adds a little shadow behind there. And I think already it's lifting the surface of this piece to the next level. Remember, working with clean water, warm water is best. Don't use that rib to really press the decal to the surface. I'm just repeating the process here and adding a few more decals here and there just to really make this surface pop. One of the things I really like about decals is what I'm doing here is that I didn't like the surface, but I can change it up a little bit, and it gives me a chance to make something that I wasn't too pleased about and fix it and make it something that's really spectacular. So that's one of the reasons I like decals and China paint. I don't China paint like I used to, but I still love to use decals because of what it does for the surface, especially if I didn't like this surface to begin with. Adds a little bit of punch. So now we're going to take this other vase that I actually used the same silhouette of this foliage, and I on my Cricut I created the stencil which creates the negative space on the vase, and then I used that same Cricut file to print out the gold foliage, which I will now use to add gold to the surface of this rather flat vase that I made. I hand painted the surface, and I'm not pleased with how it came out because, again, I'm working with a new clay body I'm not familiar with, so I'm just going to cover that up with some gold. Adding a little sparkle to something always makes it pop and sometimes makes it sell better. So let's do it. So again, this is kind of a big piece. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put it in the warm water, and I make sure that it's submerged all the way. While that's soaking, I'm going to go ahead and wet the surface of my vase, You can see where I'm going to cover this up in that really crummy little paint job that I did. I got my trusty red rib ready to go. Nice clean sponge. Remember, it should be a clean sponge, and that's ready to go as well. I'm going to use that sponge to just wet down that surface real well. This is a bigger piece that I'm working with, so in order to make it a little bit easier to work with, I'm going to cut it in half, which I just did there. Once that I can see that the decal is starting to give away from its backing, I can get going. So I put this upside down in the water because I'm going to go ahead and flip it. And this way I can just very easily kind of slide that back paper. I'm sorry you can't see it really well here, I'll do it again. Slide that back paper off without having my foliage get all tangled and everything. It makes it easier when it goes to apply the decal if you leave the cardboard with it. So watch how here I'm just very gently pulling the cardboard anywhere where I think it might get tangled. I'm going to make sure it's not and try to pull back. Using patience in this process is really important. So, you know, if you've had a really rough day, I would not suggest you do a complicated decal that evening. I like to do this with a little bit of wine, calm my nerves. You can see it's I got to press it down on the surface and kind of move it around. The wetter the surface is, the easier it is to move it around. And you see, I have it attached. And I'm just going to go over it with my finger to make sure there isn't air bubbles and I'm attached well to the surface. The decal's attached well to the surface. I'm just going to continue here to add the other pieces to this vase, but already I'm liking it better now that I've added gold. Little bit of sparkle brings everything back to life. This time you can see me pull back the cardboard a little bit better. See how I pulled it back through. So I'm using my fingertips to hold it where I want it and then pull that cardboard from underneath it. And the cardboard is wet enough that it adds a little bit of water to the surface, and so now I can move the decal around on the surface and put it exactly where I want it. And here's the results. Ooh, lovely gold. Of course, we have to include the garden. Look how nice everything looks. Yeah, that vase is back to life. And our bicycle, garden, shimmer, shimmer. Beautiful, lovely. Thanks for watching, everybody.